In 2026, prompts are no longer written for human alone. They are written for systems, validators, and other agents. By the end of the session, you'll have a toolbox of techniques to apply on your own projects. A good prompt engineer takes a normal request and turns it into structured instructions. Role prompting is about assigning the AI a specific persona so it behaves like that expert. Chain prompting breaks a complex task into smaller steps. The output from one step feeds to the next. Very good afternoon, guys, and we'll be starting our session. And I'll just give a very high-level brief. And first of all, namaste, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, and thank you for joining from across India. I am Aditya Chhabra. I'm founder of CreateBytes, CB Experts. Our AI Academy is built on the principle of building from open source. I also co-founded YugYog.ai, which are basically the two platforms for cutting-edge AI research. Over the next hour, I want to share practical techniques for generative AI and prompt engineering that you can start experimenting with immediately. Our mission is to make AI accessible, practical, and fun. And I'll sprinkle in some local examples and stories to keep things relatable. At the very end, I'll invite you to join our Discord community and follow our YouTube, Instagram channels so you can start learning from us in that direction. So we'll start, and before we begin, I'm gonna give a quick recap of what we have done in past, and the most important segment which you guys should know and understand is the scenario where we have been publishing on YouTube and Instagram a lot of webinars already. So there are a couple of them which if you view, you'll get a good fundamental understanding of large language models. So in our previous sessions, we introduced large language models, discussed how transformers work, and looked at examples like ChatGPT and Llama. You've seen these models which are trained on massive amount of text and can generate human-like language. Today, we are going to build on that foundation and explore the knobs and dials that control their behavior, new techniques like retrieval augmented generation, and best practices for writing prompts. In 2026, prompts are no longer written for human alone. They are written for systems, validators, and other agents. At the end of the session, you'll have a toolbox of techniques to apply on your own projects. Before we begin, I want you to raise your hand if you've seen or played with any text generation before, maybe using ChatGPT or Gemini or any other open source model. Used it, if you've seen it. How many of you feel like it's a little predictable or it was random in some scenarios? So were you able to get your output directly, or you had to write multiple prompts to get to that? Overall, raise your hand if you've seen something like that happening at your end too. And I'm gonna just switch the screen to just check if any of you have felt in a similar direction. Let me just check on my system. Interesting. So on the Zoom one, I can see, so there are people who have seen this happening. And this is something which is very, very common, happening on a regular basis. So what's happening? And we'll basically try to understand the overall. So when you work with large language models, you have several parameters that influence its creativity and reliability. Temperature control, randomness. A lower temperature produces safer, more predictable outcome, while a higher temperature makes the model more creative but risky. Frequency penalties, repeated words or phrases. Let's say if you have seen the model loop, AI is amazing. That basically comes in because of frequency penalties. Then there was another thing which we call top P. This is like a Nucleus Sampling which restricts the model to the smallest of tokens whose cumulative probability reaches to a number P, and that we discussed in past. And then we had presence penalties which encourage the model to bring in new ideas. Think of these like adjusting masala in a curry. You can go mild or high or spicy, and repetition penalties to avoid too much of salt and ensure the final dish is balanced. And that's what the presence of penalty is. And carefully tuning these parameters help us reduce the nonsense or overly random replies which we get a lot when we use it. So this is more towards how can you tune in the large language model. And for more detailed understanding, you can look at the YouTube video which was shared earlier. And now we are going to jump towards a very interesting scenario where we also discussed about RAG. What we discussed was in a RAG system, we had workflow which you don't rely solely on the model's training. What you do is you retrieve relevant documents from an external source and feed them to the model before generation. The model then uses that context to answer your question. For example, imagine you have been building a chatbot to answer questions about the Indian Constitution. Purely generative model which may hallucinate if it hasn't memorized an article exactly. But with RAG, you first search your knowledge base for the relevant article and pass it to the model. And this ensures that the response stays grounded. Approach makes answers more factual, and reduces the hallucination and allow you to update knowledge by simply updating your data and not retraining the entire model. In short, RAG is equal to a search and a generate. So interactive scenarios can be generated in a manner where you have asked something in a vector format, it has answered to you. Now there's another thing which I want you to just basically like get a high level idea before we actually jump onto the main topic of ours today, which is top K sampling, which means the model only chooses among the top K most likely words. If K is small, let's say 5, your output will be conservative. A large K introduces more variety, but also more risk to the model. So if you have ever, let's say, touched LLMs, you would have heard about this term top K sampling. And then there's another thing which is called as top P sampling, which is it selects the smallest set of words whose combined probability reaches the P, which is let's say 90%. This method dynamically adjusts the candidate list size. Both techniques aim to be less random than pure sampling, but more diverse than greedy search. And I like to think about top K as choosing the top few answers from an exam sheet, while top P is like picking through candidates until you have covered 90% of the class marks. If your projects, let's say, you might combine temperature, top K and top P to strike the right balance in your large language model. And now finally we are going to jump towards prompting, and I'll suggest you guys to basically go through these concepts over the YouTube channel on which we have given LLM at scale, LLM at large, and then there are some other videos which you can go through to understand it. But now here comes the important topic, which is prompting. And before we begin, I just want to ask one simple question to everyone. How many of you guys have actually used any ChatGPT, Gemini and all? Or maybe the right question is, how many of you have never used it? Anyone who has never used it, I would want you guys to just raise your hand and say that, yeah, never used the system before. There are some people who have never used it. So I'm going to give a very interesting brief around how and what you can do actually with it. So if we think about prompt engineering and see what exactly it is. So it's like you can think of it as a craft of writing prompts strategically to get reliable results. The purpose is to keep the AI focused, follow rules and return usable output. A good prompt engineer takes a normal request and turns it into structured instructions. We avoid fabrication, inventing, let's say, some kind of fake names or studies. And then we have distortion, which are mixing the real facts with wrong details. And then overgeneralization. In other words, we must be precise. It's like giving direction to an auto driver in Delhi. If you say, let's say, Bhaiya meko cannot place chhod do, you may end up at the wrong block. But if you say outer circle, gate 8 of Rajiv Gandhi Chowk metro station, you will get there without any confusion. And that is the difference, and that's the output which can actually come out from that. Now, I want to basically jump to this particular slide, and this slide is one of the most important slides in today's entire webinar. If you remember only one framework, then remember this from our webinar. And here what you see are some important blocks. Number one is role. Who is the AI supposed to be? It is the first block and it is called as role. This defines who the AI is pretending to be. If I say you are a senior backend engineer, the answer will be very different from you are a college tutor. So it's important that when you are basically telling this, you tell AI, who are you? So it's like asking advice from a chartered accountant versus your friend who watched a YouTube video about some finance or accounting data. So same question and very different quality as an answer you will get. So it's important that who is AI supposed to be every time define that. Number second is the context. What situation are we in? This is very critical, and this is where most people fail. Context give the AI background, assumptions and boundaries. Startup or enterprise, Indian users or global users, low budget or high scale. Without the context, the AI guesses, and with context it actually behaves, and it's important to understand. So that is the second important block in this. The third block is the format. How should we answer? So for example, overall answer, how should it look like? How should we expect the answer to be? And this is very critical, and this is the third format. Bullet, tables, JSON, code base, you must say, you must tell how do you want to answer to be. In real systems, format is not cosmetic. Format is like ensuring integrations are happening. So if the format is wrong, your pipelines break. So it's important that you give the right kind of format to the system. And the fourth one is the constraints. Where should the AI stop? Let's say word limits, allowed tools, think the AI which it should not be doing. This is how you keep AI safe and usable. Constraint do not reduce intelligence. We need to ensure and understand this part. They make intelligence reliable and give you answers which are basically in a certain box and not going here and there in that direction. And this is why we say a prompt actually in this generation 2026 is like a program. You're not chatting with AI, you're programming, and the behavior in that is using English when you're programming that. And now can you tell me one quick thing? How many of you so far have been writing single line prompt, like just writing it without thinking about this framework which I've just described? How many of you just were writing it or maybe following it? So maybe how many of you are writing a single line prompt? You can just raise your hand and let me know, and let me check. I can see a lot of people. So in 2025, these 4 blocks are so powerful that AI agents use this structure to write prompts for other agents. You're able to get the point? AI agents. So it's like earlier we were the humans who were writing it, but in 2025, 2026, it's the agents who use these 4 structures to write prompts for other agents in this multi-agentic framework system. Now, it's important to understand why prompting is important. Why? What's the reason for it? Prompting matters because good prompts guide AI to produce relevant, clear answers. They reduce hallucinations. When the model make things up, they help control the output format. For example, whether it's bullets, tables, JSON, or code. And the same AI behaves very differently with different prompts. Prompting has become a core skill for both students and engineering professionals. In India, where tech companies from Bangalore to Hyderabad to Gurgaon are adopting AI, those who know how to prompt effectively can dramatically speed up their workflows. If you want to stand out in, let's say, a job market, it is important that you spend some time and invest some time in this particular skill, which is very easy to get. But a lot of times we ignore it because we always think about just chatting with the system. So it's important that we understand the reason why this particular scenario, where if I'm having any kind of LLM, how should I be working with it? And now in 2026, this is again, I'll be talking about it a lot. It's not just the humans, it's also the agents, where when you're designing an agent, you're also designing how the prompt should be. So we'll discuss about it at a later stage when we touch the topic of agents in that direction. But yeah, it's important to understand how and what happens when you write good prompts. And now this is important, where what we've just seen in the above slide, we call that as universal prompt template. To standardize your prompt, use a universal prompt template. And the structure is something which is similar to the slide before. When you have a role, you are a role that sets the model's expertise, that this is who you are. Then you have a goal. Your goal is to define an objective. Like, what is the definition here when you want to succeed? So it's important that you define the goal. You provide the right context, provide the key details and constraint to it. Provide the right outcome. Specify bullets, tables, JSONs, whatever it is. And then if there is anything missing, you should have just write something around asking clarifying questions. If I am missing anything, or if anything is missing, you can ask clarifying questions. This helps. So role, goal, context, output format, and asking clarifying questions. This template works because it sets expertise, defines objectives, adds limits, specifies format, and encourages the model to ask for clarification. Imagine telling a new software intern, you are a QA engineer. Your goal is to test the payment module. We give the context that we only accept UPI payments and must finish by 5 p.m. And then we tell the output format is this Excel sheet, which is the bug report table. And if anything is missing, ask me before you start. This is what you do when you're, let's say, working and having an interaction. And that's what we are doing here. So what we are doing is basically simply giving role, goal, context, output format, and asking clarifying questions. And this is important. Now we are going to jump towards an interesting concept and add a couple of examples. And these are can give you an idea about the project and other things too. So let's apply a template like that. Suppose you are a final year computer science student interested in security and automation, and you might prompt, you are a project mentor. Your goal is to help me design a final year project using generative AI. We'll give a context. I'm a computer science student interested in security and automation. You have an output format, 3 project ideas with title, 1-line summary, and tools used. The restaurant transforms. Think of it once you've defined it, and the project can be related to a feed forward direction, or it can be something which is very vague. So once you've defined that, it's easy to demo live and can go straight into your portfolio. That's it. So again, I'll explain the output format. So 3 project ideas with title, 1-line summary, and tools used. That's your output format. The results which are going to come out, those transform a vague, very high level result into a structured task scenario. So it's easy to demo, and then you can go straight into your portfolio. If you are thinking of building something like, let's say, smart CCTV anomaly detection, this template ensures the model give you 3 concrete ideas with tools such as OpenCV, YOLO, and Python rather than some generic tests. And then I'm going to jump jump towards another example where, let's say we are working in a job, I'm an analyst. So you are a business analyst, for example. Your goal is to summarize customer feedback and propose actions. You give a context, a software as a service product where churn is increasing among small business users. Give an output format, a table with issue, evidence, suggested action. This prompt yields an output that can go directly into Jira, slides, or documents, saving hours of work and standardizing team processes. So you might discover issues such as customers finding onboarding confusion, evidence like 22% of the support tickets mention setup difficulties, and suggested actions like add a guided setup wizard. Structured prompts like this are very super powerful, and they also help in managing product feedback in the right direction. And I'm going to jump towards a very interesting scenario, which is like the code samples example, where what you can see, you can use this particular example in a lot of activities which you do on a regular basis. So this specific slide shows a code snippet using the chat completion API with our template. The key takeaway, if you look at this, is the same structure that can be reused for different use cases. In your Python code, you define the system message, the role, the goal, context, and format, and the user message, the specific request. The prompt acts like a function template. You can call it with different parameters without rewriting your logic. And building your own tools on top of, let's say, YugYog.ai or any other platform, use this approach to keep your code clean and modular. Now, there is another thing where we do, let's say, we take an example where you have concept of story generation. So the system message control the AI's behavior, setting the tone and point of view, while the user message defines the task and constraint. Important to understand. For instance, if the system message says you are a Hindi science fiction writer and the user asks for a story about interstellar travel in the year 3030, the output will reflect that creative voice. So remember, the system message is the director giving instructions and the user message is like the script itself. So it's important to know and understand this concept. And then we are going to jump towards code example of product description too. And it's important to understand that what we are focusing on by defining the role. You are a marketing expert and the context. Let's say you are an e-commerce platform selling let's say maybe handcrafted scenarios, or you can say even some sort of beverages, anything. The model can produce high quality copy tailored to your needs. And it's important to know why. Such prompts are especially useful for small businesses that when they want to automate catalog creation, social media captions, and portfolio projections. In 2025 systems, prompts are not stored in some notebooks. Understand this concept. Prompts are not stored where you have a template book where you're storing it. When you are building multi-agent systems or using it at such production level, they are live in a version control environment, and they have their own tests and they have their own mechanism of reviewing the system, like when you do a peer review code. At CreateBytes, we treat prompts like production assets. We save them at version control systems and other places. And because let's say if a prompt is broken or outdated, it can actually break the business, especially in this multi-agent environment. So it's important to give equal weightage to what you have been given so far to the code. And that is why keep them in a version control system. A lot of times you keep them in a scenario where keep on updating it, having a review process to review it, and a mechanism to review the outcome from that too on a regular basis. This is interesting because now we are going to actually jump towards the direction of some technical aspects of prompting. And the first term, which you must have heard at a lot of places, is few shot prompting. It teaches the model by example. So instead of training new weights, you provide few labeled examples in your prompt. So in the slide, let's say colors like blue, calm, green to tranquility, and then what is purple for, are used, and the model infers that purple is associated with royalty or luxury. The technique is great for maintaining consistency, following custom patterns, and performing tasks like sentiment analysis or classification. For an Indian twist, imagine prompting. In our context, let's say we say Golgappa, and that gives us an excitement. When we hear the word Rasgulla, we say it's like a little bit of sweetness coming there. And what should be the feeling for filter coffee? And that is important to understand. That's how you define few shot prompting. So the model will likely answer refreshing or energy or some other scenarios, which captures the pattern without any extra training. So that is called as few shot prompting. And remember this. And you must have heard about this term a lot, but that's how you work with it. And then you have a concept of role prompt. Role prompting is about assigning the AI a specific persona so it behaves like that expert. An example from the slide is you are futuristic robot band. One quick thing which I'm just thinking. Let's say like when we are using role prompting, it's important to know that you have complete freedom of defining the role. So you need to ensure that you're also very specific with respect to role. You can tell someone to be a CTO, or you can tell someone to be a CIO, depending upon the exact work. So a lot of times you need to think about when you're giving the role, because you have complete freedom to it. But yeah, coming back to the example, you are a futuristic robot band conductor. Suggest a song title about, let's say, again, there is one more thing which I want to touch point before I even jump towards an example. This kind of work where you have a role which is very clear, the task is specific, and there are no distractions. So it's important. Now I'll state an example and think about the exact words. You are a futuristic robot band conductor. Three things: futuristic robot band conductor. Then you suggest a song title about interstellar travel in the year, let's say 3030 or 4040. So when you define this works because the role is very clear and the task is specific and there are no distractions to it. You could adapt this to your context. You are an IIT professor. Explain blockchain to a non-technical entrepreneur in India. Assigning roles help the model adopt the right tone and level of detail. It's important that we do it in the right direction. And now there is another technique which is very, very interesting and which we call as chain prompt. Chain prompting breaks a complex task into smaller steps. The output from one step feeds to the next. For example, step number 1, who developed general relativity? Step number 2, explain the theory in simple terms. Step number 3, what real world problems does it solve? This technique is used in research assistants, onboarding bots, and study tools. In your projects, chain prompting can help you automate multi-step workflows like gathering requirements, summarizing user stories, and generating test cases. Break the problem into smaller steps and explain a recipe. Gather ingredients, prepare, let's say, a masala chai with that, or whatever example you take, but break it down into steps and use it. And this particular strategy is something which I've used along with the next one, which I'll talk about as part of my regular activities when I'm interacting with large language models. And this is something which you must have heard about a lot, which is chain of thought. Chain of thought prompting asks the model to reveal its reasoning step on a think of it with an example. What you're doing: a warehouse has 100 cameras. Each generate 2 alerts per hour. Explain step by step how many alerts are there on a daily basis. Now, what you've done, so you're asking the model to reveal its reasoning step in a step-by-step direction for complex problems. Again, stating the example, a warehouse has 100 cameras. Each generate 2 alerts per hour. Explain in a step-by-step direction that how many alerts are there on a daily basis. By encouraging the model to think through math, multi-logic steps, and planning for any other difficult task, chain of thought improves the accuracy to a very large extent. And this is very, very interesting, and this is very useful when you need transparency. Say generating a reasoning chain for regularity compliance in banking. However, remember that revealing reasoning may sometimes include private data in production. You might summarize the reasoning instead of exposing raw chain of thought. And this is important to understand why and how this happens. Now, it's important that we just touch this topic where I earlier also explained this. Prompt is equal to program. In real applications, prompts behave like programs. They define logic, rules, output formats, and failure handling. You are essentially programming behavior using natural language. Think of the prompt as pseudocode that instructs the AI what to do, what not to do, how to format the answer, and what to do if it's unsure. If you ever wrote a function in Python with doc strings and exceptions, this is the same idea, but expressed in plain English or any other language which you're using. It's empowering because non-coders can design complex workflows without writing code. And that basically came out back in 2023 and changed everything in that direction. In 2026, it's the slide title is very important, which is prompt is actually equal to a program. Now, again, it's important that we understand why a lot of times, and this happens even today, prompts fail in production due to missing constraints. The AI guesses instead of being guided. Conflicting instructions are present, one layer overriding the other. There is no proper output format. Results are messy. And the AI guessing instead of asking clarifying questions. So what is the fix? The fix is the thing which we discussed in our earlier slide, to add structure, guardrails, validation, and feedback logic. An example of missing constraint is telling the AI to summarize employee data without specifying which columns or tables it might hallucinate for non-existent fields. To avoid this, always be explicit about allowed inputs, expected outputs, and what to do when the task is impossible. One important update which you guys should know: modern systems often don't expose chain of thought directly to users. It used to happen earlier, but 2026 it doesn't. We still use reasoning internally, but we separate reasoning from final answers for safety and reliability. And this is in context to what we do in production environment. So this is important to again focus on why prompts fail in production. Bullet points, if you think about it: no output format, you need to add a proper structure, you need to have guardrails, guardrails, you need to have validation and a fallback logic present there. And then when you are putting something in production, do not expose your chain of thought. If you're using chain of thought strategy directly out in the outcome or final answer, separate your reasoning. Do not show that from your final answer, and then just show the final answer. And this is important. While we are discussing in the production, how does prompt and a validation workflow work together? So a robust system follows a prompt template, then it goes to a LLM response, then it goes to a validation flow. In, let's say, real systems where, let's say, what we do in CreateBytes, we perform format checks, schema validation, we perform retry logic, and then we have a post-processing cycle. And it's important to understand a prompt is only one layer of the overall system. It's not the final thing. It's just one layer. Just as you wouldn't deploy raw user input directly into a SQL query without sanitization, you shouldn't deploy raw LLM output without validation. Use validators to ensure the response matches a JSON schema. Use retries if the user answer fails, and handle fallback in a very logical, graceful direction. And that is why prompt template to LLM response to a final validation flow is important. And now we're going to jump towards the production example of this. Let's assume and take an example of SQL generator. So what happens in a practical production scenario? Let's say you are a database expert. Convert English to SQL. Use table employees. Allowed columns name, department, salary, and use select only. If not possible, return invalid request and output only SQL, no explanation. This prompt works because constraints prevent access to the wrong tables. See what is written, and I'll give an example again, and you can see directly on the screen. First of all, we are saying that you are a database expert. Then we are saying that convert this English to SQL. Then we say that the table which we want you to use is employees table and nothing else. That's what we have written. And then we say the allowed columns, even the columns which we are allowing you to use are name, department, salary. And then we say use select only. And if not possible to get an outcome, you return invalid request and output only SQL, no explanation. Now again, this prompt works because constraints prevent access to the wrong table. The format ensure parsable output. And again, this is something which you can focus on. Because you have put the constraints, it is preventing an access to any wrong table, and the format which you have asked for, it is ensuring that the other system which is going to use this outcome is having a parsable output, because it may be usable in a, let's say, multi-agentic system. And a fallback is handling with an edge case. Without such constraint, the model might try to delete tables or select non-existent columns. So you should always design your prompts with explicit boundaries to protect your data. And it's important to understand how and what you need to do in that direction. Now, if you want to have more control, and I've explained about temperature and penalties in the previous YouTube webinar, you guys can just search about that. It's present on YouTube. I'll just give an idea about, in prompt engineering context, how does temperature and penalties play their own role. To fine-tune responses further, when you're writing a prompt, you can adjust temperature and penalties if you have control of your LLM. A low temperature, which is, let's say, 0.1 to 0.3, makes the model focused and deterministic with fewer mistakes. While higher temperature, let's say 0.8 to 1 plus kind of temperature, make it more creative but prone to hallucinations. Stop sequences tell the model where to stop generation, for example, using end of answer to truncate an out. Frequency and presence penalties, again, reduce repetition, encourage the model to introduce new ideas. Think of temperature as, let's say, something which is like adding more intensity to it, and penalties as telling the chef, don't add the same spice twice. So temperature is giving you variants that add more masala, more different scenarios, and penalties is saying that while you're doing it, do not add the same spice again and again. That's the difference. In 2025, no serious system trusts a single LLM response. Like if LLM come back with a response, no system trusts it in the multi-agentic framework. We assume failure by default with these and design it for recovery. And that's how we design the system. And it's a very important aspect. No serious system trusts a single LLM response. And when you automate and build workflows, we have to design it where we assume that failure is happening by default and design the system for its recovery. Let's say the IRCTC platform, you don't trust one server, you build retries and all, and then you ensure that if something goes wrong, you have a retry mechanism. And that's how you have designed architectures too. If you wanted to prevent your model from repeating the same sentence again and again, let's say, and this is something which I would love for you guys to answer, and just raise your hand. And I've just explained it a few minutes back. Let's say you have a system where the system is giving an answer that, okay, do this, do this, do this. We have discussed about temperature and penalties. Which parameter is the one? And if temperature it is, just raise your hand. If is temperature the right parameter to ensure that block the repetition of the same output again and again, or is there some other one? Raise your hand if you think it is temperature. A lot of you guys are still saying temperature, but it's not temperature. It's basically penalty, which you guys need to know and understand. And we just discussed is that the second frequency come in the picture, we are talking about penalties and then reducing them. Now, this brings up to a closure of our very high level discussion of prompting and prompt engineering. We are committed to helping you master these skills beyond today's session. And I would love you to join the CBX community. We run AI workshops and masterclasses with top experts, and they all are basically either part of CreateBytes or working here and there with us at global level. We create, like at a very high level, you guys can literally look at our Discord community, look at the GitHub repository. We curate resources to keep you ahead of any kind of new thing which has come up, any trend, any technology. And we on a very regular basis are hosting these AI mixers and webinars. So by connecting with fellow AI enthusiasts, you can learn, build and grow yourself in a very different direction. That's what we are aiming for. There's a QR code, guys. You can just scan it and access our Instagram account. The second you follow it, you'll get a message from our community folks, and they'll give you access of the Discord community where we are discussing these. And there are a very interesting GitHub portfolio projects which you can get access of and build the latest state-of-the-art technology at your end using those GitHub repositories. Again, finally, like I want to end this via just explaining why you should even consider CBX as an academy for yourself. So we design our programs to transform your career by focusing on outcomes that matter from an open source perspective. You'll gain hands-on AI skills. There'll be a very interesting synergy with how you can use open source state-of-the-art technology and build production grade systems with that. We are very much focused towards contributing to very high level VLM, computer vision and NLP models across the big open source community, and we can help you get in touch with them. And a lot of times in India, we don't understand the fact that open source community and the direction gives a validity to engineers like us, and also a very interesting and powerful career path. But thanks a lot, guys, for your time and energy, and I hope today's session made some complex scenarios simpler for you, and also understanding of prompt engineering could have been much better after this session. Thank you very much. Good day, guys. Bye-bye.